Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. Just jump already. The cruel shout cut through the night air, hanging there like fog over the river below. The young woman's shoulders tensed as she gripped the bridge railing tighter, her knuckles white against the cold metal. 40 feet below, dark water swirled and churned, promising an end to everything. The city lights reflected in ripples that seemed to beckon her closer to the edge. Around her, a small crowd had gathered, most with phones raised, their faces illuminated by blue screen glow, recording what might be someone's final moments. Some walked past with purposeful strides, eyes down, pretending not to notice. Others slowed just enough to take in the scene before hurrying along. Nobody approached, nobody helped. Someone laughed nervously. A car horn blared in the distance. The distant wail of police sirens barely registered in her mind. Too late, she thought. They're always too late. The girl closed her eyes, leaning slightly forward, feeling the cold night air on her face. That's when the distinctive rumble of a motorcycle engine cut through the murmurs of the crowd. The bike slowed to a stop. Nobody paid much attention as a helmeted figure dismounted until someone gasped. The whispers started instantly. "Is that? No way. It can't be." If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The figure removed his helmet, revealing a face that millions would recognize instantly. Keanu Reeves stood there, his long dark hair slightly tousled, wearing a simple black jacket and jeans. The crowd's energy shifted immediately. Phones that had been capturing a potential tragedy now swiveled to document a celebrity sighting. But Keanu wasn't looking at them. His eyes were fixed solely on the young woman whose fingers were still gripping the railing as if it were both her last connection to this world and the thing she most wanted to escape. The woman hadn't noticed the commotion behind her. Her name was Sarah, though nobody in the gathering crowd knew that. 26 years old, she had spent the day clearing out her apartment, leaving neatly labeled boxes for her landlord to find. The eviction notice had been the final blow after losing her job last month. The medical bills from her mother's cancer treatments had drained what little savings she had. With no family left and nowhere to go, the bridge had seemed like her only option. She didn't hear the approaching footsteps, soft and deliberate, stopping a respectful distance behind her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The voice was gentle, almost hushed, but carried clearly through the night air. Sarah flinched, startled by the proximity. She didn't turn around at first, not wanting to see another face filled with morbid curiosity or, worse, someone filming her lowest moment. But something in the voice's quiet sincerity made her pause. "The river, I mean," the voice continued. "Always moving, changing. Never the same water twice." There was a thoughtful pause. "Kind of like us, I guess." Sarah turned her head slightly, enough to glimpse the speaker from the corner of her eye. Her breath caught. Even in her distressed state, the recognition was immediate. What was he doing here? Why would someone like him stop for someone like her? Behind him, the crowd had grown, their whispers forming a constant background hum. Some were edging closer, phones still recording, trying to capture the interaction. A few police officers had arrived at the scene but were hanging back, seemingly unsure how to proceed with the celebrity now involved. "They're just waiting for me to jump," Sarah said bitterly, gesturing toward the crowd with a slight nod of her head. "Entertainment for their social media." Keanu followed her gaze toward the gathering spectators, then turned back to her. Maybe some of them are, he acknowledged with unexpected frankness, but I'm not. He took a careful step closer, still maintaining enough distance to avoid making her feel threatened. His eyes, kind, slightly sad, as if they'd seen their share of pain, met hers directly. I'm just someone who knows what it's like to stand at an edge. Something in his words struck Sarah. Not pity, not the hollow encouragement strangers sometimes offer, but a glimmer of genuine understanding. For the first time, she fully turned her face toward him, her hands still gripping the railing. The police were motioning for people to step back, creating space. Among the crowd, opinions formed rapidly. Some whispered about a publicity stunt. Others wondered if John Wick would save the day with some dramatic gesture. A few even complained that their night view of the bridge had been interrupted by this scene. But there were also those who fell silent, sensing that something authentic and fragile was unfolding. Something that deserved respect, not speculation. Between the famous actor and the unknown woman perched on the edge, a private conversation was beginning, even as dozens of eyes watched. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. You don't know anything about me, Sarah said, her voice catching. The wind had picked up, sending strands of her hair across her face. You have everything. You could never understand. Keanu's expression didn't change. No defensiveness, no hurt pride. He simply nodded, acknowledging her words. You're right, he said. I don't know your specific pain. And yes, I've been fortunate in many ways. He paused, his gaze drifting momentarily toward the dark water below. But I do know what it's like to feel that the world has emptied out beneath you. To wake up and wonder why you should keep going. Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more carefully. The man standing before her wasn't the action star from the posters, nor the internet's beloved celebrity. He was just a person, his face etched with lines of experience, eyes that held shadows of their own. My sister had leukemia, he continued quietly. My daughter was stillborn. My girlfriend died in a car accident. Each sentence fell between them like stones into still water. Sometimes loss piles on loss until you can't see past it, until it feels like that's all there is. The crowd behind them had gone remarkably quiet. Even those still filming seemed to sense the gravity of what they were witnessing. A police officer approached cautiously but was waved back by his superior, who recognized that interrupting now might do more harm than good. Sarah's grip on the railing loosened slightly. My mom died 3 months ago, she said, her voice barely audible above the sound of the water and distant traffic. Cancer. I spent everything trying to save her. Now I'm being evicted. I have nowhere to go. She let out a bitter laugh. I don't even have anyone to miss me. Keanu leaned against the railing beside her, not reaching for her, just physically present in her space. I believe you, he said simply. The 3 words carried more weight than any elaborate speech could have. And I'm genuinely sorry. From the gathering crowd, someone called out, "Take a selfie with her, Keanu," followed by scattered laughter. Another voice shouted, "Tell her you're breathtaking." A few people snickered. Something flashed across Keanu's face then. Not the anger of a celebrity being harassed, but a deeper, more protective response. He turned slightly toward the crowd, his body language shifting almost imperceptibly to shield Sarah from their gaze. Could we give her some space, please? His voice was firm but polite. This isn't a movie. This is someone's life. The effect was immediate. Some people looked down, embarrassed. Others stepped back, murmuring apologies. A woman near the front actually put her phone away, nudging others to do the same. Sarah watched this interaction with surprise. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me. You could just walk away. Everyone else did." Keanu turned back to her, his eyes searching hers. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said quietly. "Not on a bridge, but at a time when I couldn't see past my own pain." He paused, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the dark water. "And because I believe that every life has value, including yours, even when you can't feel it anymore." Sarah's eyes welled with tears she'd been holding back. "It just hurts so much," she whispered. "Every day. Getting up, trying, failing, over and over. I'm so tired." "I know," he nodded, and the simple acknowledgement of her exhaustion felt like the first honest response she'd received in months. Not, "It gets better," or "just stay positive." Just recognition of her pain as real and valid. Behind them, the crowd had transformed. The carnival atmosphere had dissipated, replaced by something more reverent. Even those still recording seemed to be doing so with different intent. Not to capture celebrity gossip, but to witness something genuine unfolding. A police officer had quietly approached again and was speaking softly into his radio, likely calling for mental health support. "I keep thinking about what my mom would say if she saw me here," Sarah admitted, looking down at the water. "She fought so hard to live, and here I am." Her voice trailed off. "What was she like?" Keanu asked gently. It wasn't a distraction technique. The question held genuine interest. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the shift, by his desire to know about her mother rather than focusing on her current crisis. "This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk." "She was stubborn," Sarah said, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time. "So stubborn. The doctors gave her 6 months, but she lived for 2 years. Her fingers absently traced patterns on the cold metal railing. She loved gardening. Even when she was too weak to stand, she'd have me bring pots to her bed so she could plant seeds." The memory seemed to momentarily transport her from the bridge's edge. "Sounds like she was quite extraordinary," Keanu observed, his attention completely focused on Sarah, as if the gathering crowd and the precarious situation had fallen away, leaving just this conversation about a remarkable woman he'd never met. "She was," Sarah nodded, tears flowing freely now. "The last thing she said to me was, 'Keep planting, sweetheart. Even when you don't think anything will grow.'" Her voice broke. "But I couldn't. I couldn't keep anything alive. Not her, not her plants, not even myself." Keanu was quiet for a moment, respecting the weight of her words. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "You know, grief isn't something you overcome. It's something you move through, carrying it with you." He glanced down at his hands. "Some days, it's so heavy you can barely stand. Other days, you almost forget you're carrying it at all. But it's always there, changing shape." A paramedic had arrived and was waiting at a distance, speaking with the police. The crowd had grown quieter, many people now simply bearing witness rather than spectating. Someone had even asked others to turn off their flash photography, creating a more respectful atmosphere. "What if I can't carry it anymore?" Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. "What if it's just too heavy?" Keanu considered this, not rushing to offer platitudes. "Then you let others help carry it for a while," he said finally. "Not to take it from you. No one can do that, but to walk beside you until you find your strength again." He shifted slightly, extending his hand palm up on the railing near hers, an offer, not a demand. "Like right now, just for this moment. You don't have to carry it alone." Sarah looked at his outstretched hand. Time seemed to suspend itself over the dark water below. The decision before her crystallized into perfect clarity. She could end her pain by letting go of the railing, or she could reach for this unexpected connection, this thread of possibility being offered by a stranger who somehow understood. From the crowd, a woman's voice called out softly, "We're here too." Sarah looked up, startled. A middle-aged woman stepped forward slightly. "My son died by suicide 3 years ago," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. I just wish someone had been there on his bridge." Another voice joined in. "I've been where you are," said a young man near the front. 2 years ago. I'm glad I stayed." Something remarkable was happening. The crowd, initially gathered as spectators to potential tragedy, was transforming into a community of support. Phones were lowered, faces turned upward. Real human connection replaced digital documentation. Sarah's breathing changed as she looked from Keanu to the faces in the crowd. These weren't just voyeurs anymore. They were people with their own stories, their own pain, their own reasons for stopping on this bridge tonight. And somehow, improbably, they were reaching out to her. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Living. It hurts too much." "You don't have to know right now," Keanu said gently. "You just have to decide about the next moment, and then the one after that." His hand remained steady on the railing. Sometimes courage isn't about grand gestures. Sometimes it's just about taking one more breath. A police officer approached slowly, respectfully. "We have people who can help," she said quietly. "Professionals, and places you can stay tonight. You're not alone in this." Sarah looked down at the water one last time. The dark surface that had seemed so inviting, so final, now looked simply like what it was: cold river water on a winter night. Not an end, not an answer, just water. With a deep, shuddering breath, she reached out and placed her hand in Keanu's. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. Using her other hand, she carefully turned, still gripping the railing, until she was facing away from the edge. The crowd, seeing her movement, let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Some were openly crying. Others nodded encouragement. A few applauded softly before being hushed by those beside them. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." Paramedics moved forward as Sarah took her first step away from the edge, Keanu's steady hand still holding hers. They didn't rush or grab her, just offered support as she made her way toward solid ground. Her legs trembled with each step, the full weight of what had almost happened, and what had actually happened instead, beginning to register. Once they reached safety, Keanu didn't immediately withdraw, as celebrities often might after a public moment. Instead, he waited as the paramedics brought a blanket and began speaking quietly with Sarah. The crowd, sensing the intimate nature of the moment, began to disperse respectfully. Some lingered at a distance, clearly moved by what they'd witnessed. "I'd like to help," Keanu said to the officer in charge, his voice low enough that only those nearby could hear. "Not just tonight, but with housing, medical care, whatever she needs." He pulled out a card and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal contact. Please make sure she gets the support she requires." The officer nodded, clearly impressed by the genuine concern. Sarah looked up from where she sat in the back of the ambulance. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice steadier now. "For stopping. For seeing me." Keanu shook his head slightly. "No thanks needed. Just promise me something?" He waited until she met his eyes. Remember what your mother said. Keep planting, even when you don't think anything will grow. Sarah nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'll try. By morning, videos of the encounter had spread across social media, but not in the sensationalist way one might expect. Most had been edited respectfully, focusing on the community that formed, the words exchanged, the human connection. Comment sections filled not with celebrity gossip, but with crisis hotline numbers, personal stories of survival, and expressions of gratitude. A week later, a local news station reported that anonymous donations had covered Sarah's outstanding medical bills and secured her affordable housing for a year. Mental health organizations noted a significant increase in volunteer applications and calls to helplines, people both seeking and offering support. In a rare moment of addressing his personal life, Keanu was asked about the incident during an interview for his latest film. I didn't do anything extraordinary, he said simply. I just recognized someone in pain because I've been in pain too. We all have. Sometimes we forget that about each other. 3 months later, in a small community garden on the city's east side, Sarah planted her first seedlings. Her hands, once gripping a bridge railing in despair, now pressed gently into soil rich with possibility. Beside her, a small plaque read, "For Mom. Keep planting." Some days were still unbearably difficult. The grief hadn't disappeared, just as Keanu had said, but she was learning to carry it differently. Occasionally, people recognized her from the bridge videos, but most respected her privacy. A few shared their own stories, forming connections that grew like the plants under her care. The woman from the crowd who had lost her son became a regular visitor to the garden. Together, they created a small memorial section for those who had lost their battle with depression, a place of remembrance, but also of growth and life continuing. Somewhere across the city, Keanu Reeves continued his life, unaware of the garden or the specific ways his intervention had rippled outward. He hadn't sought updates or public acknowledgement. That night on the bridge hadn't been about being a hero or a celebrity. It had simply been about being human, about recognizing pain in another person and refusing to look away. In the end, that was the story that went viral. Not of a famous actor's dramatic rescue, but of what happens when we truly see each other, celebrity or stranger, in spotlight or shadow, and reach across the void to say simply and truthfully, "You are not alone." Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.